What's up, guys? Welcome to MMA Mad Unfiltered. I'm your host, Nick Risner. This week, UFC on Fox 26, I believe. It's Rafael dos Anjos versus Robbie Lawler. Now, this fight is crazy. This is a big Fox card main event. This is a fight that obviously they're anticipating to be a wild back and forth brawl. That's what it's drawn up to be on paper. I am expecting that. As far as who's going to win, there's a lot of question marks. And granted, I guess that's the case for any fight. But with Robbie Lawler, he was on this crazy win streak. He looked unstoppable, right? When he went through that title run, he ended up winning it from Johnny Hendricks, Rory McDonald. He defeated after that, Carlos Condit. Finally lost to Tyron Woodley, which, if you're a cynic or even a realist or whatever, you can chalk that up to Tyron Woodley landing a lucky punch. Now, lucky punch is a bit of a stretch because it obviously takes skill to land that punch or whatever, but I've always been under the school of thought that if you land one punch, that even though it's you definitively win the fight, no controversy, I think that's actually less of a definitive win than if you just dominate somebody for a longer amount of time. Now, it's not Tyron Woodley's fault that he landed a punch and his opponent didn't keep standing. Tyron Woodley did what he had to do to win the fight. But as far as the longevity and future of Robbie Lawler after that loss, there are a lot of question marks. There's a very good possibility that he's still the same guy he was. And the only evidence we've seen since then, now granted, this is all a long time ago. His last win before that was January of 2016. That's almost 2 years ago. Then he lost to Tyron Woodley the following summer, so a year and a half ago. And his last fight, he's only fought once since then, and it was against Donald Cerrone. And this is this most recent summer, July 29, 2017. And that's a fight that I think if you were to draw it up, probably at the time too, it's hard for me to go back and remember, but at the time, and then definitely a year or two before that, if you put that fight on paper, people would look at that as fight of the year contender. Like think about if you had to draw up your perfect all violence match. First of all, Donald Cerrone was a lightweight for a long time, so him moving up to welterweight, we never even really speculated that this match was going to happen. Then when it happened, it was like, man, this might win fight of the year. It didn't even win fight of the night. So it's not that. I mean, Robbie Lawler won the fight, and it was after a layoff and after one of the worst losses he's ever suffered, losing the championship, getting starched. It took 2 minutes and 12 seconds for him to lose to Tyron Woodley. So for him to come back and get any sort of victory against a guy like Donald Cerrone, who is a tough fighter, it's impressive. But the question mark is Robbie Lawler still this dominant force that looked unstoppable for so long? I don't know. And then Rafael dos Anjos, who also in his own right, one of the scariest guys to ever grace the welterweight division, or lightweight division before that. Now he recently moved up to welterweight. He's a guy who has question marks too, because he was on a crazy win streak. He had a brief little sort of stint in the spotlight where he looks like he was unbeatable. When he ran through, let's look at this lineup here because it's crazy. He beat Jason Hyde, Benson Henderson, Nate Diaz, Anthony Pettis, Donald Cerrone all in a row. A number of knockouts strewn throughout that. He was on this crazy run. I remember when he fought Anthony Pettis, people thought that he wasn't going to win that fight, and he really looked great against Pettis. It was almost like it made me question. I was like, did I overrate Pettis, or did I just underrate the shit out of Rafael dos Anjos? And it seems like I underrated Rafael dos Anjos because he followed that up with a crazy win over Donald Cerrone, which I know I brought him up in both cases, but this is 2015 Donald Cerrone. This is when Cerrone was, it was a title shot, so obviously he went on a crazy enough run to get a title shot, but this is prime Donald Cerrone in my opinion. And he just got starched by Rafael dos Anjos. But then he met Eddie Alvarez, who was a guy who, he was great in Bellator. His UFC was, he was winning, but it wasn't the most dominant wins, it wasn't the most exciting wins. He ran through Rafael dos Anjos to get that lightweight championship. He, not to go down this rabbit hole, but he ultimately lost to Conor McGregor. But going back to Dos Anjos, he then followed up with Tony Ferguson, who we've seen what Tony Ferguson can do. And it was a great fight, but he lost that fight as well. So that was 2 losses in a row. He did a weight class change that we normally don't see. I think a lot of times when guys are, later in the career, they'll move up a weight class, but I think a lot of times you see guys who are struggling and they'll try to drop down a weight class to have more of a size advantage. He went up to welterweight and proceeded to win his next 2 fights. So the first one was against Tarek Saffiedine, then he beat Neil Magny. That was this past September. But the Neil Magny one was a really dominant first-round submission. And then, if you want to play into this, it was in Canada, which is where this next fight is. Not that really applies because he's Brazilian, obviously. But I don't know. So it's interesting. Is Robbie Lawler has he lost a step? I mean, I feel like, there's obviously the stretch where he wasn't in the UFC anymore, and he came back and he looked unstoppable and all this, but at a certain point, age catches up with you. Now, has it, or have we not really seen it? Can you attribute the Woodley loss to a lucky punch? Can you attribute the Donald Cerrone, some might call it a boring decision? Can you attribute that to ring rust and just sort of shaking off the ring rust and getting a win any way you could? And granted, if you're going to play that game, it hasn't been a short amount of time. Now, we're not talking about a 2-year layoff here, but it's been over 6 months or just about 6 months. So to say that if ring rust was a factor in the Cerrone fight, it absolutely could be a factor in this fight as well. Now, Rafael dos Anjos, who has been streaking and has every reason to believe that this is a perfect opportunity for him to beat a household name at welterweight and sort of thrust himself into a title picture. Obviously, a former champion. He's 2-0 since moving to 170. Maybe this is an opportunity for him to really solidify his chances. And you've seen what the UFC does as far as building stars and how star power is, I think, more important than ever in this day and age, especially with the WME era. And I think that with that sort of star power, if they're going to dedicate the resources to put these two on Fox, and if the winner can win this fight in an exciting fashion, whether it's a crazy knockout or submission, or if it's a crazy back and forth fight, whoever gets their hand raised at the end of that, I think that, I think in their minds, just from a financial standpoint, they already invested the resources in building this guy once again. Granted, both of them are names in MMA circles. Robbie Lawler is probably a little bit more of a mainstream name, but as far as WME is concerned, they invested basically promotional efforts into this by putting it in the main event slot of a Fox card, and both these guys are really knocking on the door. Now, the welterweight division is very confusing. No one knows who's fighting Robbie Lawler. Tyron Woodley. No one knows what's happening with George St. Pierre, who was the middleweight champion. He vacated. Now he might be moving back down to welterweight. He might be retiring. Who's to say? Wonder Boy is right up there again, but after 2 title shots in a row, and then I think he looked fantastic against Jorge Masvidal, but to win a decision, he didn't get a finish there, so that hurts his chances a little bit. It's hard to make the case for him for a title shot, a third one. So who knows? I don't know what they're going to do. It's a cloudy division, but this is a very important fight as far as determining contenders. And I don't know, man. My gut says Robbie Lawler. I feel like Robbie Lawler is going to win this, but it's very possible that the Robbie Lawler that shows up this weekend is someone that we've never seen before. And there's no reason to believe that Rafael dos Anjos isn't perfect for this weight class, even though he's moving up a weight class, and he's obviously had a lot of success at lightweight as well. There's no reason to believe that maybe he's not more suited for welterweight. I mean, he's 2-0. So who's to say? 2-0 since this summer, by the way. So he's moving fast, too. This will be a third fight since June. So I'm going with Robbie Lawler, but I don't know, man. It's definitely not a sure thing. Let me look it up real quick, the fight odds. While I'm doing that, make sure to go to MMAMad.com for all your event coverage this weekend. As I said, big Fox card. The good thing about those two is they're earlier on in the night. So, yeah, so you can do that and then go out and enjoy some drinks with your friends. Enjoy the holiday season. MMAMad.com, MMA Mad Official on Facebook and Twitter. You can find me on Twitter at Nick Risner MMA. My name is Nick Risner. All right, I got it. So the Fox card, yeah, it's like dead even odds. Literally couldn't be more even between Robbie Lawler and Rafael dos Anjos, which pretty much lines up with my analysis of it. I think there's a lot of question marks, and I think this is a tough one to predict. But my gut says Robbie Lawler, and I don't know what to see. It should be an exciting fight, though. I don't see this being a boring fight. Even if it's a slow start or something weird like that, just because of the stakes, I can't see how this would be a boring fight. Both guys are pretty durable too, so it's probably going to be a long back and forth. That's my guess, unless someone gets caught. Obviously, those are pretty much the only options. But that'll do it. So I hope you guys enjoyed this MMA Mad Unfiltered. We're going to keep doing these previews, these quick hitters previews of the at least the main event of every single upcoming card. And yeah, check out the MMA Mad podcast while you're at it. Rate, review, subscribe on iTunes. Give us a thumbs up on YouTube. Subscribe to the YouTube channel to get all these videos and more. And that'll do it. Peace, guys. Enjoy your weekend.